Greetings riders, Nick here with Pegasus Motorcycle Tours and Consulting with the second half of our lane splitting discussion. The first video argues for the benefits and the needs for lane splitting friendly laws. Check that video out also to give you some language when arguing for lane splitting with somebody who might not agree with you. So now that I've hopefully persuaded you for the benefits of lane splitting, let us discuss the specific guidelines to keep in mind so you can do it safely and correctly. Rule number one, always cover your brake lever. This is rule number one for motorcycling in general, but it's not necessarily intuitive. I actually saw this for the first time on a MotoGP race over a year into my riding career and immediately deduced the logic behind it. I ride with only the forefinger and the thumb gripping the throttle, and the other three fingers are always resting on the front brake lever. I've seen riders do it in the opposite order as well, to each their own. This saves you the split second needed to grip the brake lever, which could be critical for avoiding an accident. If you're not doing this now, I strongly urge you to incorporate this into your riding technique until it becomes second nature. The easiest way to tell an amateur rider apart is by how they grip their throttle. Rule number two, never assume you're seen or heard by drivers. In fact, it's safe to assume other drivers probably don't see you. Riders typically know this by now, but it's worth repeating, and it's particularly worth remembering when lane splitting. And for those who don't ride on very loud pipes, chances are drivers can't hear you coming over the Bruno Mars blasting in their cozy little air-conditioned cocoons. Don't rely on anybody watching out for your well-being but yourself. Rule number three, put yourself in the mindset of an aggressive driver. Chances are, if you ride a motorcycle, when you sit behind the wheel of a car, you tend to drive a little more aggressively than others. If this is the case, this is a good thing, because you're that much more able to predict the behavior of drivers around you. For example, if the lane that you're driving in is slowing down and starting to come to a crawl, ask yourself what would you do given that the lane right next to yours is moving without issue. You'd probably swing over. I always keep this in mind and imagine myself in the mindset of other drivers around me. I do this instinctively, and it has enabled me to forecast moves countless times before they leave me without options to react and avoid a collision. Prediction is the name of the game. Your eyes should consistently be scanning the front wheels of the cars in front of you because they will be the first to let you know and indicate a lane change. Rule number four, remember that riding in general and lane splitting in particular is a probabilities game, but you can significantly decrease your odds of being involved in an accident by keeping the following in mind. The painted center lane has less traction, and the California box dots can throw you off balance in slow speed, tight maneuvering. Use flashers in heavy traffic. Try to increase your visibility as much as possible without counting on it. Use high beams in daylight when lane splitting for the same reasons, basically. When pulling up to a light while lane splitting between rows of multiple vehicles at a complete stop, pull directly in front of either the leading car on each side. You don't want to hang out between the cars when they're stopped at a red light. This is important because they might not see you pulling up, and when the light turns green suddenly, you might miss a shift, lose your footing, or stall. If you're in front, at least you dictate what goes on when the light turns green. If you're in the middle, you risk getting hit by both cars on each side. So when you must stop, do so directly in the front of either vehicle to your left or your right. This way you fully control the action when the light turns green. However, this only applies when the row of cars is long and there's no danger of being involved in a pileup. Always be in gear and be sure to view your mirrors frequently when stopped. Just because you're stopped doesn't mean that the car approaching you might do what is expected, nor the car approaching the car behind you. Always be ready to move out of danger by way of throttle. I've seen bikers fold their mirrors when lane splitting. I wouldn't suggest it. You need them to see what's coming up from behind you. Exaggerated swerving is one of my techniques that really gets me noticed. And it also gets the cars to give me more space. What I'm referring to here is swerving in your own lane when you have space to do so. It creates an interesting light show in the mirrors of the vehicles in front of you, which might be enough to alert them of your presence. I've heard advice that it's best to ride in a straight line when possible when splitting, but I could not disagree with this more. There are times and places, typically abroad in very populated urban zones, in countries like Indonesia and Brazil, where bikers swarm the streets and share the same lane at once, passing on either side at all kinds of speeds, honking their horns, all kind of chaos. If the biker is slow, he'll just ride in a straight lane and hope not to get hit. In that regard, it's good to ride straight. However, in places like North American highways, the biggest danger are the cars around you, and you want to give yourself as much distance from them as possible. So definitely don't ride in a straight line when lane splitting if you have the space to get further away. Loop and thread your way around like a snake and keep the revs high so that you can evade and be agile by way of throttle. So imagine as if you were slaloming between staggered cars and exaggerating the S-line that you take, because when the cars are staggered, they're the most dangerous for you. This is for three main reasons. A, they're in motion. B, they tend to be in each other's blind spots. And C, there's free space for them to move into other lane, which you actually might be occupying. However, when swerving, keep in mind that other bikers might be behind you and may misinterpret the swerving as an invitation or opportunity to pass. This is easily mitigated by simply taking control of the space you occupy or simply letting them pass. Which brings me to my next point, rule number 5. Let bikers behind you go first. Follow another bike if you can, but give yourself plenty of distance so that you don't fixate on the bike instead of the car. Whoever goes first will open the road up for you. This is logical. However, don't follow too closely to compromise your space for reaction. Also, don't follow at all if the riding is faster than your comfort zone. If another biker lets you pass, do so and thank them by extending the right foot, if it's safe to do so, obviously, but never take your hands off the controls. You don't have the time for that. Damn bunnies, man. They like distract me, because they just run across. Okay. Rule number 6. Only lane split between the two leftmost lanes. There are fewer bigger vehicles there, like buses and semis. There's less options and opportunities for lane switching and exiting, and that's simply where drivers expect you more. This probably is the most common and most irritating mistake that I see riders do. They split in the opposite side of the car that I too am splitting. This forces the car to be squeezed between two bikes that appear to come out of nowhere. The tendency for drivers to overcompensate and overreact one way or another is huge, and passing in lanes other than the far left lane puts us all in much unnecessary danger. Here you see a perfect example of this. The first rider is passing in the middle lane, clearly surprising the driver and thus forcing them to overcompensate and move further over, which happens to be in the second driver's space, approaching just a few seconds behind. He also clearly surprises the driver again. Now imagine how stressful and irritating that might be for the driver and for the second biker, honestly. It's so discourteous and counterproductive for getting the message across that lane splitting is a great law that every motorist should get behind. It simply looks like chaos to other drivers, and I can guarantee you no driver likes it when two bikes zips past on both sides at breakneck speeds while everyone is stuck in crawling traffic. Rule number 7, remember that there's little to no room for error, so best be on your game every time. Remember that the bigger the speed difference between you and the cars in front of you, the less time you have to react and the larger the chances of catastrophe. So ride only as fast as you're able to react to your environment. Needless to say, this is true of motorcycling in general. Speed coupled with close proximity to other drivers is a very dangerous combination. Keep in mind that other hazards of the road can also spell disaster for a motorcyclist, such as debris, which is typically kicked over by cars in the path that you will probably be taking when lane splitting. Rule number 8, ride like a good neighbor. Do it correctly, because again, we are our only ambassadors and we have a vast majority to convince to give us more biker-friendly laws and accommodations. Use your blinker even if they don't. And the same rule as when passing applies, stick to the speed limit. In fact, my suggestion is not to lane split past 40 miles an hour. The danger versus time saved is too disproportionate at speeds greater than that to make it worthwhile. Rule number 9, refrain from communicating with drivers. Definitely no middle fingers and yelling. You don't have the time for this distraction when lane splitting, and it's foolish and dangerous to assume it would do any good anyways. But if it's absolutely safe to do so, compliment them for giving you space, or signal them to use their blinker if you have plenty of space and time to do so safely. But don't get emotionally involved and don't get angry and reactionary. Part of what makes lane splitting so fun and exciting is that it's such a mental exercise. It's one of those Zen moments of being in the zone, of being absolutely focused. You got to be on top of your game. And remember, ambassadors, rule number 10. If you find yourself getting complacent, zoned out, angry, distracted, just stop lane splitting. It's not for you and it's not worth the risk. Also, remember that bicycle lanes are not motorcycle lanes. Using them to pass vehicles on the right is illegal and can be disastrous. Don't be another statistic. We all got somebody that loves us and that wants us to come home every night. We owe it to them, we owe it to ourselves and to our communities to come home safely after every ride. Thank you for watching. I would love it if you would participate in the conversation by leaving your comments and opinions below. I'm curious to hear about your experiences while lane splitting. And also, remember to share with the riding community so that we can help this channel grow and we can help bring you more videos like this. In the meantime, Nick, I'm out.